Hey, what's up, YouTube? Well, haven't made a video in a while, and I decided to talk about something a little bit different. Um, so I'll just get to it. Well, the title of today's video is Life Before My Fitbit. Now, what a Fitbit is, it's this thing on my arm that basically, keeps track of everything I do. And it's kind of a motion sensor, and it's like a combination watch. See, it tells you the time, but it's also got a pedometer and an altimeter, and it measures your heart rate and everything else. It can tell when you're sleeping and all that. So basically, I've had it for 3 years now, I want to say, sometime in March of 2017. So 3 years. Wow. But something I'd like to talk about is how my life has changed over the past 3 years. And yes, I do have some show and tell. I feel like, I don't know how to explain this, but it's just so hard, and that's why I think that a lot of my videos will become very embarrassing, like later on down the road, as a few years go by and I think back on, wow, why was that really so important to me back then? And it's very much the same way when I look back on, say, 2015, 16, 17. And I think about, just how different I am today. Even though I physically haven't really changed all that much, I'm the same height, pretty close in weight. And, I just look back on just a couple years ago. And when I see old pictures of myself, it just makes me so sad. When I look at my arm and I see something other than this Fitbit. See, you tap it and it kind of tells you like how many steps you've climbed, which it says 4, but of course they're not actually staircases, and I guess maybe I should go into detail about that. But not right now. And it, how many minutes of activity. But when I look back on old pictures of myself and I'll see something like this on my arm. This was one of my favorite little watches, or the blue version. You see, they're kind of like brother watches, so to speak. They're probably both intended for little boys, I used to collect watches. And see, here's kind of a more girly version. This one is the star version. It's pink. This one is the camouflage. This, I think, was the very first one I ever got. But they have this company called Dingbats, or they used to. And they would make these watches that say Lucky on the face. And I don't think any of them are still ticking. And here's a little alien watch that's a different kind. And I have a few other kinds of watches. But I used to love an analog watch, which, what that means is a clock with hands, basically. And I love it because I don't know, I just feel like this whole digital world is just so foreign to me. I come from a time, way back in the 80s when that was pretty much what everybody wore, I think. Except for, a few techie guys, may have already been wearing those digital watches, but they were always like black and gray, and, the watch itself was black and made out of plastic, so it wasn't very classy looking. And if you wanted to dress nice, well, you wore more of an analog watch of sorts, a gold watch, or, kind of a Rolex watch. And so for many years, I used to like these Dingbats watches, because they were made for children who were just learning how to tell time. And I liked them because they were a cheap watch. It wasn't too big, but then it wasn't feminine, because a lot of the smaller watches are feminine because they're made for women. And so I like the thought of a lightweight, masculine watch with an analog face. And one of the reasons I've just always loved analog clocks and watches is because, I like to draw clocks. You know, whenever I draw pictures, I would just always like to put clocks in there. And I used to be really impressed with myself because when I was like 14, 13 or 14, I taught myself this mathematical formula of how to calculate the angle at any time of day. And of course, it has nothing to do with putting a protractor on the actual clock. I just mentally, mathematically calculate the angle. You know, like for example, everyone knows 3 o'clock is a 90-degree angle, 6 o'clock is a 180, and so on. You know, 12 o'clock is 0, and, 1 o'clock is 30. You know, those are pretty easy and obvious. But from that, you can also calculate any other time of the day based on the fact that the change per minute is 5.5 degrees, for the simple reason that, the minute hand moves 6 degrees, the hour hand moves a half degree, and they're moving in the same direction. So, the minute hand passes the hour hand 22 times a day, for the simple reason that the minute hand goes around the clock 24 times, the hour hand twice, so you subtract. So 22 times a day. Yeah, and I was just really impressed with myself because you know how they say girls suck in math and all that. But yet I am genetically 100% female, I mean, I was menstruating every month, yet I would teach myself all these little cool tricks in math, all these different ways to arrive at the same correct answer. And it was just mind blowing, I thought. But none of my teachers were really all that impressed, so. They would they would force everyone to show their work so that they would do it the same way, if you know what I mean. And so while I still made straight A's, I did well in math. I was just never recognized as anything special, for being this rare, gifted girl who figured things out in math that the boys had never even thought about. But it's a long story. I've had situations that I'm still angry about today because the memory is just as fresh as if it happened yesterday, where I didn't get awards a lot of times because I wasn't quite as smart, or my average wasn't quite as high as the top girl in the class, but yet I was still higher than all the boys. And for some reason, the boys just didn't do quite as well in school, as the girls. And so a lot of times, I had a hard time beating out the really smart girls, but yet if I'd been a boy, I feel like it would have been a lot easier to get such academic awards, just because they had to award it to a boy and a girl. And so, if they could have just reclassified me as a boy, which of course would never happen, especially not in the 90s, I could have gotten a lot of those awards that were just given to boys, with slightly lower averages, but because they were boys. So anyway, no one was really impressed, with my clock angle calculations or my ability to understand why there are precisely 688 Friday the 13th in a 400-year cycle, and, the fact that 1900 was not a leap year, unlike 2000, and, my knowledge of, just certain mathematical pieces of information that don't really matter, like my ability to calculate ages and, precise numbers of days and what weekday someone was born and so on. Nobody really seemed to care all that much because, like, what does it really matter when you could look it up on the internet or get a calculator and, arrive at the same thing, So I guess the plus one of being a girl just didn't really impress people as much as I wanted it to. Like, hey everybody, I'm a girl and I can do math. Whippy! So yeah. So I just always liked analog clocks and watches. I just like to calculate the angle in my head just to keep my mind sharp. And I used to love these little dingbat watches because it's like it just appealed to that part of me that just wanted to be a little boy, the little boy that I never got to be. When I would put on one of these flame watches or my camouflage watch or, watches like that. And I like the face on them because it's like they're about the size of a women's watch, but obviously they're masculine because they're meant for little boys. And I used to have a Superman watch, but it broke. Unfortunately, one problem I'm having is just like a lot of other things made out of rubber. They're becoming gooey for the simple reason that the polymer is breaking down, and they were never meant to last that long. You know, most kids probably broke these watches within a couple weeks of wearing them. So I have all these watches, and they don't work because I have no reason to put batteries in them. And they even used to glow in the dark, I think. And what I really wish is that someone actually wanted to have them. You know, I just have so many watches. But unfortunately, every time I list them on eBay, it's like they get absolutely no bids, no matter how low I set the price. And then, of course, I can't lie about the condition. You know, I cannot deny, for example, that some of the paint or coloring has worn off. You know, I can't just lie and say that this watch is in pristine condition, because I'd be lying. And I'd get negative feedback. So, I have all these old watches, dating all the way back to the early 2000s, maybe even earlier than that. But now it's like this Fitbit has pretty much taken over my life. You know, it's been an obsession for the past 3 years. And it's like I go to all these ridiculous lengths just to make sure I get at least one flight of stairs. And, I set my goals pretty low so that I don't have days where I just don't meet them, because that would really bother me to actually not reach my goals one day. But, I do all kinds of things to trick it into thinking I'm climbing stairs. And, fortunately, I've been able to keep up with my goals over the past 3 years pretty much every day. I don't think within the past 2 years I've ever not met my goals. But the only thing I really would like is if I could wear this underwater when I swim. But unfortunately, I think it would mess it up. But yeah, I just often long for the person that used to wear these watches and enjoy them. And I just feel so sad when I think about how this hasn't always been something that ruled my life. But at the same time, I've really enjoyed having a watch that I don't have to set for daylight savings or anything like that. And it tells me the date. It tells me my heart rate. It tells me, pretty much everything that I've done that it recognizes. So while it was fun to wear these little watches, these little time learning watches for boys, I guess that part of my life is over, and I just wish somebody wanted them now.